Hi, everyone. Welcome to our What's New in SAP HANA Cloud webinar. My name is Andrea, and I'm part of the SAP HANA Cloud Product Management team. Joining me today are our product experts who will talk about their most recent innovations in delivering our Q1 2026 release. As always, we won't be able to cover the full scope of innovations during this webinar. So if you would like to explore more, I encourage you to check our upcoming What's New blog post, as well as the technical documentation where you will find the complete set of updates. Additionally, feel free to use the Q&A tool through the session, and we will be happy to answer your questions. So with that, you can check here our experts that will be joining the call, and we can check to get today's agenda. So first we will have a general update by myself, and then Shabana is going to introduce our SAP HANA Cloud Agent procedures and the beta that you will for sure not want to miss out. And then Christoph is presenting about machine learning and NLP service updates. Followed by Jan, who will be presenting about calculation view modeling updates. And then Joshua will be presenting about SQL tools for administration in SAP HANA Cloud Central. Afterwards, we have Hai, who will present about the introduction of a performance analysis application in HANA Cloud Central. And then Ralph will be updating more on our multi-region disaster recovery and active innovations from last quarter, and we have an update right now. So first, let's start with our general update. First, we have the data center expansion. With Q1 2026, SAP HANA Cloud is now available in 4 additional regions: Frankfurt and London on Microsoft Azure, Tokyo and Sterling in the US East and on SAP HANA Cloud infrastructure. With these additions, SAP HANA Cloud is now available in more than 40 public cloud locations worldwide. And this expansion gives customers greater flexibility to choose their preferred infrastructure provider and align deployments with regulatory performance and business requirements. We are also strengthening our presence on SAP HANA Cloud infrastructure, which now spans 7 regions. Importantly, the new Europe Azure region lays the foundation for multi-region disaster recovery within the EU, and the new US SAP HANA Cloud infrastructure region prepares similar capabilities in the United States. So overall, this is a key step toward greater resilience and global coverage. Next, let's look at one of the most impactful updates in this release: automation of elastic compute nodes through ECN policy. So previously, ECN advisor only provided recommendations and scaling had to be done manually. But now with ECN policy, you can fully automate provisioning and deprovisioning based on those recommendations. There are 2 main approaches. So first, schedule scaling. This is ideal for predictable workloads. You can define schedules similarly to recurrent calendar events, so daily, weekly, or monthly, and we define start and end times. Keep in mind that these times trigger provisioning, but actual readiness may take 5 to 20 minutes. The second approach is demand-based scaling. This is for dynamic workloads, and the system automatically scales based on thresholds like CPU or memory usage. You can choose between 2 scaling modes, so availability, which prioritizes responsiveness, and cost, which takes a more conservative approach. Scaling can go up to 16 nodes, but you can define limits to control costs. And 2 important considerations are that table replication is not part of this automation and must be handled separately. And to maintain consistency, each instance supports only one demand-based policy, but multiple scheduled policies can be configured. Overall, this feature significantly reduces operational effort and improves cost efficiency. Moving on, we have sizing and performance classes, we have introduced new performance class options across hyperscalers. On Ali Cloud, we have introduced expanded memory classes as well as compute and high compute classes. This gives you more flexibility to choose the right configuration for your workload, whether it's memory intensive, compute heavy. The expanded memory class supports up to 8 terabytes of memory, the compute class up to 672 gigabytes, and the high compute class up to 352 gigabytes. On Amazon Web Services, we're introducing new 16 gigabyte small instance sizes. Previously, the smallest available instance was 32 gigabytes, which was too big for some lightweight workloads. And these new 16 gigabyte instances are specifically designed for low throughput workloads. So they provide a right size options for smaller applications, development and testing environments, and cost sensitive scenarios as well. This allows customers to run SAP HANA Cloud more efficiently without over-provisioning resources. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Shabana, who will present about the SAP HANA Cloud agent procedures and our beta.
Thank you, Andrea. And hi, everyone. So yes, my section is going to be a very brief one with introducing the upcoming beta program for our data and discovery agent procedures, which we announced at TechEd 2025. And now, as we close the Q1 of 2026, the agent procedures are ready to be tried out by our customers and partners. And before I move on to the details of the program itself, let me just quickly give an explanation of how these two agents actually work together and what they actually mean, right? So we can first look at the discovery agent, which is more like an agent that actually understands the data. So it acts like a smart catalog navigator, I would say. So when a user would ask a question, it could look back into the knowledge graph that is automatically created and the rack table that is there in the backend to figure out which tables, views, or objects are relevant for the question that is being asked. So it basically answers the question like, okay, where should I look for to find you the answer? And also then it returns the result in a useful structure like, what columns exist, how the tables are connected, what relationships matter, and all those things. So now we will have a very clear understanding of the data landscape itself with the help of our discovery agent procedure. And then comes the data agent, right? So this one focuses on the execution part. So once it knows, what data to use, it kind of generates the right SQL query. So it makes sure that the query is correct, it is optimized, and it is aligned with what the user is actually asking for. And it can also handle like functions or procedures if needed. And if you want to look at an overall view of how it works end to end, it's pretty straightforward. Like if you see at that picture at the bottom of the screen, first the user asks a question in a natural language. It could be through Joule or any other custom agent that they might be building on their side. And then the discovery agent comes into picture, identifies the relevant data objects for you that is based out of the knowledge graph that is sitting in the backend on HANA Cloud. And then the data agent generates and runs the query, and finally the results are returned in a much more structured way to our user. So just in simple terms here, so one agent is figuring out what data to use, and the other agent is like figuring out how to get it efficiently done for you. So that is a quick intro on like what these two agents are, just like a rehash from what we heard back in TechEd 2025. And now coming to the beta program, what we're actually looking for here are customers and partners who would want to experience this firsthand, right? Who are dealing with complex data landscapes, or they just want to enable natural language access to their data. And also if you guys are exploring any AI-driven analytics or conversational data experiences in your use cases, this is a great fit for you guys. And also as part of the beta, you will get early access to these capabilities. You will also get a chance to work closely with the product engineering teams, test your real use cases, and also have an opportunity to directly influence where the product is going next. Also, the participation is limited, as is mentioned, so we are selecting based on how well your use case aligns with this program. So if this is really interesting, you can scan the QR code over there, or like click on that registration link. We would be very happy to connect and go through the use cases with you together. Yeah, And I think that was a quick one. And with that, I'll hand it over to Christoph.
Let's come to the machine learning updates and the Q1 release of 26. So again, we have a series of functional enhancements for specific use cases. One feature which we introduced in the Q4 release was the text feature processing with our AutoML engine. Basically, we introduced the raw input of text columns to the machine learning pipeline processing, and we enhanced this scenario with a new operator, which doesn't really make use of text embedding, therefore is a little bit more lightweight and faster in processing, but also concluding to very good results. And I will demo this use case in a second. The second function is a text embedding function for dimension reduction, which you can apply independently of the actual embedding vector creation. So if you already have vectors created and stored them in vector columns, you can make use of this function to reduce the dimensionality, for example, from 768 vectors to, for example, 256 or 128 for a more lightweight processing using then machine learning functions, for example. The text classification functions have been improved with introducing floating point precision, which makes the text classification faster with a slightly smaller precision of the classification task. So that might be also very suitable. A new feature dimension reduction function is the feature agglomeration trending technique. It basically targets scenarios where you have a large number of columns, for example, thousands of numeric columns, for example, and you can use this feature agglomeration function to condense that to a smaller number of feature columns which have a similar feature pattern if you want. A clustering function called affinity propagation, which has been there for a while also in our predictive function library, also now supports this clustering technique applied to vector feature columns, which are typically very high cardinality and therefore require this distinct support by this function. Our machine learning tracking and schedule management functions also have been enhanced in this release, concluding the ability to also now create chains of multiple tasks or subtasks if you want, which can then be executed sequentially or in parallel. A new SQL function here on the right-hand side we are introducing for working with our new cross-encoder function, which I will also explain in more detail. So let's look at these key enhancements regarding text column processing. There's this new TF-IDF operator, which basically takes the term frequency matrix and reduces it down to a more compact and dense vector in the end of numeric values, if you want, which can then be processed more efficiently by the AutoML engine and therefore help, for example, in classification scenarios. And let's look at an example how this new technique works. So I'm starting off here. Firstly, with the data I'm using service ticket text data. So I have a table with just an ID, the classification target column called label_str, and the actual ticket text, different service categories, access, storage, purchase, performance, etc., which I have with different number of frequencies in the data I'm using. And then in the second step, I'm basically creating the AutoML model here. It might look a little bit complicated, but the key takeaway here is that I basically have this one text column, ticket text, which I'm classifying as a text variable. And then we are specifying some classification algorithm, gradient boosting, a neural network, and a random forest these are the choices for the pipeline to build the classification model. And then there are two pre-processing tasks, text embedding and this TF-IDF, which I explained very briefly. And then the function basically runs off, trains the model, and comes then back with different, let's say, models it has created. The first model here with ID 0 is the gradient boosting classifier, which has been used with a given parameter set, and it actually chose the TF-IDF text preprocessing operator to come up in as the best model. What is now most interesting is certainly and how well does the model perform. There's also a score function which we can apply to the data, where we would then see, like you can see here as the output, that for ID 46, which was in our testing data, actually in the category purchase, was also predicted as purchase with a high confidence. And here on the right-hand side, I'm giving the original text again. So we can see from this one row example, the classification is highly accurate, which can then also be concluded from the statistics of the actual model used. And one more thing, here I need to go. The new cross-encoder model, which we introduced also in Q4 of last year, is a new natural language or text processing model, which basically takes as input the result set of a vector engine similarity search, so maybe the top 100 results, and then together in pair with the original inquiry, the query, we pass these 100 result sets and the query as a pair through this cross-encoder model together, and by that get a more precisely re-ranked result set, because the nature of a similarity search using the vector engine is that while I'm giving a good result set, the actual order within the set might not be the best. So for example, the best result might not be at position 1, but at position 10 or 25. Therefore, in retrieval augmented generation scenarios, we typically do such a re-ranking using a cross-encoder. And we've introduced now in this release a SQL function, which is explained here. Cross-encode, we're passing in the ticket text, the column, and then together the initial inquiry, some of the parameters, what's the name of the model we want to apply, and basically run the re-ranking, and what we're getting out is the cross-encoder similarity. And with that, I'd like to pass over to Jan.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Hello, everybody. I will talk now about the new innovations with calculation view modeling. And the first part, the first innovation that I talk about is semantic onboarding. And here, it is actually not only a new functionality in HANA calculation views, it's also something that's coming with BDC, SAP Business Data Cloud. That means till this functionality is available for you, you need on the one hand side an upgrade on HANA Cloud to the QRC1, but also you need a new release from Business Data Cloud, which will come end of April, roughly. Now, what is it about? The idea is that if you have already your calculation views and you continue working with the calculation views in HANA Cloud, you still sometimes want to also integrate these calculation views and reuse them in SAP Business Data Cloud. And this is now an option how you can do that. So where you start is you start in Business Application Studio, and there you select which calculation views should be made available to Business Data Cloud. You have two different integration modes. You have the integration mode flat view or construction kit. The flat view, the idea is that you expose the calculation view as is, and you don't expect larger changes than that you want to do in Business Data Cloud. So this is something for a very quick integration, but you then also don't expect that much is happening afterwards in Business Data Cloud with it. The construction kit approach is a different approach where you get more of a construction kit, so individual building blocks that you can then rearrange in Business Data Cloud and work on them and extend in the models of Business Data Cloud. Now, if you have selected which calculation views you want to use for in Business Data Cloud as well, then you go into Business Data Cloud or Data Sphere and then start the onboarding process using your HANA connection. And I will show that soon. So that's just now for a recap if you later look at the slides. The semantic information that we currently take over are input parameters, variables, currency and unit conversion information, labels, shared hierarchies, and information about dimensions of star joins. So with that, you have now an option to work in HANA Cloud with your calculation views, but at the same time, use these calculation views also in Business Data Cloud. And let me just quickly show you how that looks like. So as I said, you start in Business Application Studio, and here you have an integration mode. So let's select the construction kit approach and I deploy. And while I'm now deploying that, let me just get this name and go over to Data Sphere. In Data Sphere, I have the semantic onboarding option here. I select my space in which I want to onboard it. And then I select the connection that I want to use to the database. And now I can select the model that I would like to use. So I just copy it here. So it's already deployed. Yeah. So I can find it here now and I can select it. And now if I click on Start Import and Deploy, the effect table will be generated. So you will see that now here that it's running. And while this is now running, let me just show you something here as well. If you now deployed something in an integration mode, obviously you can build models on top in Business Data Cloud, which means if you now change here something, you can also introduce a limitation in Business Data Cloud. And because of that, we show a warning here. So if you have selected once the construction kit or flat view approach, then if you go to off, you see a warning that you would potentially destroy something in Business Data Cloud by turning that off. Now here it's already deployed here. Now let me just open that. And what you see here is we have attributes taken over. We have information about unit or unit of measures information, so currency conversion information, but we also have input parameters where you can then also use the input parameters. And now the next step would then be that you can then expose, for example, a dimension view. And if you expose the dimension view, for dimension views, you only have the construction kit approach, because here it doesn't make much sense to say you expose it as a single unit, because typically dimensions are used in another view as well. So if you expose this as well, then later you will see here in the associations also the dimension appearing. Now, what I would like to mention here is that we are starting a customer care program. And the idea is here that we work closely together, seeing how these new functionality is implemented by you. So what we expect is a kind of project that you are working on, and then we offered to have dedicated sessions to discuss the project and topics that arise during the project and try to solve issues as they arise. And especially, we are very much interested then in the feedback by you about what is perhaps what could be added as an additional functionality, or where we could improve the functionality as well. So as I said, this program is currently in planning. It will start in April, end of April probably. Just watch out for the registration. We will send it around later. Then this is just about this customer program, a little bit more detail there. Because I talk now about semantic onboarding, but there's also a second aspect in this program that is about if you develop calculation views on data products. So if you have a data product in Business Data Cloud and you install it in your HANA Cloud, then you can also develop calculation views on top. And also if you're working on such a project, we would be interested to discuss that during the customer care program. With that, I come to the next functionality, which is about data classification. Here you assign a certain classification to your calculation view, telling how sensitive the data is. This is a metadata description of your calculation view, meaning we don't check then anywhere in the database the status. It's just for metadata for you, where you classify a calculation view, and then you can read the classification of a calculation view, for example, by selecting from this table view. And we give you the full freedom, what you want to have as a classification status. So whatever you fill into this table, BMC sensitivity classification, will be available then in this drop-down. And we also support the consistency across calculation views, in a sense that when you open a calculation view that has a lower rating than directly consumed calculation views, then we show also a warning. So let me quickly show also that one. So here you don't see any data classification rating, and the reason is because there are no entries in the table yet. So without any entries in the table, the functionality is just not shown. So you can now insert into this table here, for example, public, internal, or confidential. And with that, now if I reload, you see now that we have the classification available. And let's say I set it now to confidential. And now if let's say I use another calculation view, and in this calculation view, if I consume the other calculation view that I should obviously deploy before, then I will see a warning that I'm using a calculation view that has a higher rating than the current one. So you see now, and then I'm asked whether I want to upgrade it. If I say yes, then also here the rating is upgraded to the rating of the consumed calculation view. But this is working for direct calculation view consumption. Now, the next functionality is about MDS cubes. And with MDS cubes, we have now an option to reduce the memory consumption and also the loading time when you load the MDS cube by offering incremental loading. Incremental loading works in a way that you define an incremental column that is increased with new records. And during loading, we check for this incremental column. So basically, when we are loading the calculation, the MDS cube, we store the highest number or value of this incremental column, and the next time the loading is triggered, we load only records that have a higher value in this column, which means this column that you select has to have an ordinal increase with new records. Just to show also that quickly in the how it looks like. So if you have here an MDS cube and you have here a column, oh, that's perhaps not a good an empty. So if I take here purchase order ID, I can also then select here under incremental columns the purchase order ID. And now with new loadings, only higher numbers than the last time purchase order ID was loaded will be loaded. So this reduces the memory consumption, obviously, also CPU consumption, and can speed up your loading. The next functionality is about calculation view modeling directly in the editor, and this is about the option to copy with descendants. So if you want to reuse a modeling structure in another view, then you can use copy with descendants, and that also across calculation views. So for example, if I now want to copy this with the descendants, I can just right click on it, copy it, and paste it here, and all the structures then are taken over to this new calculation view. So we have it now here, and I can reuse it in this modeling, in this calculation view. Then we improved how you can get access to the names of your data sources. So that consists of two parts. On one hand, we allow now easier to copy the data source name, but also we make it easier to find the data sources. So let me just demonstrate both in the system. It's much easier to demonstrate than to explain it. So you can just right-click now on a data source and use copy the data source name, or you can also use a keyboard shortcut for that. Now, the next part of the data source is that in the outline, we also include now the data sources. So let's say I'm looking now for all data sources starting with KC. I can enter them, and now I see just the data sources with KC, and then I can also navigate here and see this in projection 1, and the other one is in projection 2. Then we have enhanced the key column indicators, which is in a way of getting visual information about key columns or primary keys. So if you have a data source like a table with a primary key, or you have a data source like a calculation view with a semantic key, then this will be visualized, this key information in the calculation view. It will be visualized in the join nodes, in the definition, but also in the mappings. We have three different icons. The first icon is the complete key. So here the full primary key is available in this node. Here the key is not complete anymore, for example, because one column of a key column was not mapped somewhere in between, or we have also status undefined if you have some nodes in between that can remove the key property. For example, if you use a union, you might aggregate different, or you might get different entries for the same key, and then it's not a key anymore. And therefore, these kind of nodes can lead that the key is shown as undefined. So with this information, you can easier decide on which columns to join, and also better understand the cardinality that you should set in the join. So let's also look at that quickly. So, here. Let me close this one. That's a little bit more. So here, for example, in the in the table, we have two columns as a primary key defined. So we see here the two columns. And now the important point is that the second part of the key is not mapped. So if I go now into the join node, I see that here from a projection 2, I get a not complete key. And if I now, for example, would go here and map the purchase order as well, then I would get here also the complete key. And similarly, if I now put something like, let's say, a node in between, then the key property will be gone because the node can lead to can remove the key property. Now, the last two innovations are about, one is about another way of reducing memory. Here it's about the hints that you can use, build disk hints. And the idea here is that if your scenario is not very performance critical, then you can use this hint to balance performance against memory usage. So the idea is basically that intermediate results are not kept in memory to a large extent, so that, and then smaller parts are streamed, which then reduce the memory consumption during a query execution, but of course can also lead to longer runtimes. So this is a dedicated hint if you are working in a scenario where you don't care so much about performance, but you care much more about memory or low memory. And yeah, to show also that where this is coming from. So this is about the execute hint list, where we offer hints that you can add here. And if you now go here, we have a full selection of the build disk hints. So you can simply select it here, and then these hints will be added to this calculation view. And the final innovation is now about the visualization of blocker. Here, as a background information, certain nodes, like for example, window functions or rank nodes, per default block the pushdown of filters. And this is necessary because there's a difference whether a filter is first evaluated and then the ranking is done, or the other way around. And because of that, there's per default, we don't push filters below this node. Now you can override this default behavior by selecting allow filter pushdown for rank or window function nodes. And we offer now an icon, or we show an icon that visualizes that here a filter is at the moment blocked. That can be intended because you want to have it semantically like that, but it can give you also a hint that perhaps this is a node where you should think about whether you want to allow filter pushdown or not. And very similar, there's also a pattern, a multi-consumer pattern, which is when one node is consumed by more than one node, like here. Also here, the filter is not pushed down per default, but if you want to override it, you can set the ignore multiple output for filters. And to make that easier for you to detect these situations, we show here now also the filter, the icon here. And with that, I'm finished with my innovations, and I would hand over then to Josh. Thanks a lot.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Joshua C, and I'll be covering some of the new SQL console tools and new things coming to HANA Cloud Central. So the first thing that I want to show is our new SQL console code completion. So as you start typing within SQL console, it will now show SQL snippets and schema objects as you type, making it quicker and easier to work with SQL. The console will display recommended snippets, such as create table or grant. And when the users select one of these snippets, it will insert a complete template automatically into the console. It also provides lookups for tables, views, and columns within the current schema, reducing errors and helping users find the objects they need. So these improvements are really aimed to help with productivity and making the SQL experience more approachable for new SQL users. And next up, we have the SQL Console Gen AI. So this will actually be coming out in early April, and we will be adding 3 new actions within the Run dropdown menu within SQL Console. So the first new action is Run Prompt. This will generate SQL statements directly from natural language and insert them right underneath your selected prompt. All the users need to do is highlight their prompt and hit the Run Prompt button. Next, we also have the Explain SQL statement using AI, which is used in a very similar way as Run Prompt. However, this will provide a clear natural language explanation of SQL statements, including complex queries. And for the third button, we have Optimize SQL statements using AI. So this uses AI to refine and improve existing SQL statements to better help with performance. So I do have a demo here for you guys to see. So here in the Run drop-down menu, you can see the 3 new added buttons: Run Prompt, Explain, and Optimize. So all you need to do is highlight your prompt and hit Run Prompt. So here I'm just asking to see all the columns within the schema, and it will give you a little bit explanation of what the statements are doing, and you can just select your statements and hit Run. And as you can see, it comes out with all of the outputs. Now here we just have a select from, join, and order by. And if here I will be testing out the Explain SQL statement using AI. So similarly, just highlight and then hit the Explain SQL. And right underneath, it will show an explanation of what's happening. So it's retrieving these schema name, table name, and columns, and then join and how they're ordered by. And for the last button, here I just have a select and a from, and similarly, just hit the Optimize SQL. And here we see the AI optimization results. So here just explains a little bit of what was done. So using explicit inner joins and table aliases for clarity. So we can see here that instead of originally tables.schema name, we have tbl.schema name, and it's pretty much just helped with making sure everything is just more clear and improved. And for that. Now for the HANA client side. So developers can now use a connection parameter named replication role is equal to replica to request that that connection is made directly to a replica. All they need to do is within SQL console, when logging into an instance, at the bottom, we now have the advanced option field. So this is where users can now specify connecting to a read-only replica. This will improve cost efficiency and performance by offloading analytical workloads from the primary system while still maintaining full high availability readiness. And feel free to also check out our new tutorials on routing queries to read-only replica. And the SAP HANA client drivers are now officially available on NuGet, making it easier than ever for developers to integrate SAP HANA Cloud into their applications. Developers can quickly include both the HANA.NET driver and Entity Framework Core provider without needing manual downloads or custom setups. Users can now see the updated tutorials on connecting using a Microsoft Entity Framework Core and connection using the SAP HANA.NET interface below. And I'll be passing it over to Hai next.
And so let me briefly go through my part. I will try to introduce a new application in HANA Cloud Central. And to explain some background, there are many feedbacks from customers said that in HANA Cloud Central, a very important capability is missing, which is do the performance analysis, troubleshooting, and diagnose these issues. And we try to support this part. And there are mainly 2 use cases added in this new application. For the first one is the predefined analysis presets. For this use case, even if HANA Cloud Database user is not familiar with HANA, don't have enough knowledge and experience, we provide kind of the presets for the mostly common performance issue like CPU bottleneck, memory pressure, and also the general database log contention issues. So we provide these presets for these users, these type users, and for the experienced users, we also provide the flexibility to create the customizable analysis views. So in here, we provide many pre-built performance chart libraries so that user could just select these performance chart library in the library for the specific analysis scenarios. And to support both these use cases, that we should have the functionality to support the drill down analysis, which is not just showing the symptom, but should help user to find out the root cause behind these symptoms. And this is also added to this new application. And let me explain these key features with the UI interaction. So first part is the preset views. So once you open this performance analyzer application, then the predefined preset will be loaded. It depends on the entry point, access point that you navigate to this application. The preset could be different, and I will also cover this part in the later example slides, and also the entry point slides. So in this screenshot, the memory preset is chosen. And in addition, there are chart library for custom use. And in this UI, there is a button called Show Chart Library. If you click that button, then a pop-up window is showing, and in here you can select various predefined chart performance chart categorized into 9 categories like CPU memory log. And in this example, memory is chosen, then you can check all these charts related to memory. And the last one is the interactive charts. So at the top, there is always load history to show the critical metrics, and you can check the trend and find out the anomaly time range. And if you select the time range, or the data or the dashboards charts will be updated accordingly. And the overall time range we support is 42 days. And in this time range, you can just select the time range and drill down, do the drill down analysis. And let me show you a practical example to help you better understand how to use this application. This is about, suppose that there is an alert in your HANA database, HANA Cloud database, and you check the alert via Alert tab, and you found out it's an HTTP blocked transaction alert. And in the Alert tab, there is option to navigate to the performance analyzer. There is a button called Analyze Performance Issue. If you click that, you will navigate to the performance analyzer. And it's not only just the navigation, but it also passes the context. For example, this is the blocking issue. It's related to log. So the log preset is selected. And also for each alert, there is start time, and if it's inactive, then there is an end time. So the time range is also automatically passed to this performance analyzer application. And furthermore, if you want to check more details or more facts or other information, then you can choose the chart library. And for example, search for transaction. And in this part, you can find out all the pre-built performance chart related to transaction. And in this example, I add 2 charts. Which one is update transaction count, and another one is block the transaction. So to add this, you can find out, okay, what's the system update workload trend. And you can also check who is the log owner, and is it normal that a log owner is holding the log for a long time that trigger an alert. And For the last slide, I want to share the access points. If you want to try this new application, just as I demonstrated, you can use alert application, and also you can use other 4 access points like Joule assistant, and also site navigation. There is performance analyzer. And in each instance overview, there are memory and compute cards. You can click the Analyze Performance button to navigate to the application. And last but not least, you can use the Command Palette and Type Performance Analyzer to navigate to the application.
Okay, so welcome, Ralf Zekala, and I would like to present some updates. One of the updates you just saw was Joshua, so really great to see the UI is also adapting. But first we start with multi-region disaster recovery. So here you might remember this is not the first time we talk about here in this session, but this time we expanded now to more partners. So as you see here in the middle, we started with AWS in US 10. We continued end of last year with EU 10 and EU 13 in Frankfurt and Milan. Now we do the same job more or less for Azure. So this is very important. So we have US West, US East, Virginia and Washington. We have EU West in Amsterdam and EU Central in Frankfurt now in our portfolio, which gives us the advantage now to have a second partner. And you can imagine we will extend further down the road. Next one probably is GCP. We will have to see. So here you see the setups quite easily with some maps behind it, and the data centers. So there's still a plan in here because we are still in the last steps to release it end of the month. So stay tuned. So you see we are going on this path and want to roll off multi-region disaster recovery with more partners, more features, and so on. Also, the administration tool by BTP is in the last steps, so that I hope soon we also will get a graphical tool to manage, to couple these instances in the different regions with the BTP tool. That said, next important update I have here is for active read enabled. Again, here we now extend the feature set. Last time we talked about a statement routing, where you can place a hint in the statement. Now we come to another option you might already know from HANA on-prem, connection routing. Connection routing is quite important here. For certain workloads, which are also presented here on the slide in the bottom. You see export import often used by customers to bring data out into a data lake or whatever. So this export can easily be offloaded now with the connection routing. It's a little bit different from on-prem. In on-prem, we had 2 IP addresses, you might remember, for the source and for the replica. Now here, we have only one SQL endpoint. So we need to use a trick, and the trick is mentioned here. It's a connection property. So for your SQL session, you have to set the connection property, and this you just saw with Joshua's presentation. We will also have a detailed slate shortly after. And with the connection property, it's defined that this SQL session or SQL connection is then routed directly to the replica. You can have multiple of these SQL connections, and only one dedicated one or several of them could be rerouted to the replica for sure. Another very important item I would like to mention, because it's really important, you need to have a new client package, at least version 2.28. We thought about making it more automatic, but the challenge is here an egg and hen problem. We need to make it aware here via this channel. Please keep in mind, if you would like to play around with connection routing, take care that this new client is used also for tools which might be in between, like SAC or whatever is using these kind of technologies for you. So very helpful. Here a little bit of an example. You just saw this replication role replica in the presentation from Joshua, but you could also set it to replication role source. No? There might be situations that you might start on a replica and later you think it's better to run other stuff on the source. So with these options, you can switch between these different roles. Here is a screenshot. It's small. Yes, I know. Gives you some overview. Again, new client is also displayed here as an outcome of the SQL statement. Very simple to look out for this version information for the client. With the orange encapsulated line, you see here the host name of the instance, and with a -1, you see the replica, the initial replica. Later, if you do a takeover, of course, this role can switch as usual. And on the right side, you see this new option together with the HTTP SQL here. And with that, it's quite easy to use and so on. If you already tried the first part, active statement routing, please be aware you might have seen in the first week after release some bugs, but they were already fixed, all kinds of situations, and please reconsider using statement routing, connection routing, and try it out. With that said, I would like to hand over to Andrea to end the session.
Thank you very much, Kai. Just as we are on top of the hour, I just wanted to share a quick update with you. We will have the HANA TechCon coming this year on July 16. This is a community-driven event where developers, architects, and data experts come together to share real-world experiences and best practices. So it will take place in St. Leon Roth in Germany. And if you're interested in connecting with peers and diving deeper into the SAP HANA Cloud topics, this is definitely one to mark in your calendars. And please learn more about the event in this QR code. And with that, I just want to remind you that we will be sharing the assets from this release, and follow us with the What's New in SAP HANA Cloud tag in our community. Thank you very much to all our speakers and for everyone attending today, and have a good rest of your day.